All right, so what we're going to talk about today is Richard Bartle and his gamer classification system. And if time permits, because we did burn a bunch of time today doing good, useful things, but was time spent, we may do some in-class analysis, but we'll see how much time we have left here. Okay, let's get started. Okay, so who is Richard Bartle? So, unlike a lot of the people that we've mentioned so far, he's alive, all right, so still very much with us. Writer, professor, game researcher, developed one of the first MUDs, multi-user dungeon. Anyone ever play a MUD before? Yeah, I've seen some hesitant hands. So, yeah, these are like an MMO precursor, right? They were text-based, but they were attempting to build these massive multiplayer worlds, before we had the ability to do this graphically, before internet connections were fast enough to handle that sort of data. Uh, and really through the creation of these MUDs, multi-user dungeons, and the early MMOs, he developed this idea of the Bartle taxonomy of player types. Now, as we go through this, I'll say because of this is very much kind of biased towards the kind of MMO way of thinking about things. I still think it's quite useful anyway, but that is the bias here that he's approaching. And yes, caveat, I'm sure you can come up with a different taxonomy than this. I'm sure you can come up with different player types. I always see sort of academia, game studies, Twitter, sort of looking askance at some of this. But hey, he did the work. He wrote books on this. I think it's still pretty useful. Maybe someday you'll do an even better job if you're going to become a researcher, because some of you may do that. In fact, okay. So the four player types, achievers. All right. So when we think of platinum trophy hunters, are you an achiever? Is that you? All right. So tell me the most recent game you platinumed. I'm curious.
Most recent would be Uncharted Lost Legacy. My first platinum was Death Stranding.
Okay, wow. Okay, Uncharted Lost Legacy, Death Stranding. Let me tell you, I don't think I've platinumed anything in my life. Actually, in my entire career on the PlayStation Network, which tells you something about the player type I am. I think I might have tried it a couple times. I think I do distinctly remember thinking, I'm going to get the Yakuza 3 Platinum. I'm going to get this. And then, what happens is I run across the first, like, brutally hard, insane one to get. And then I gave up. I think there's like one game that way back in the day, I think it might have been like Sonic Racing or something, where the platinum is super easy. I should have started with that. So I love the idea of achievements. I'm just, I just haven't accomplished that. So good job on those platinums. Right. So explorers, and now definitely describing me big time, I think, love to immerse themselves in the game world, love to find glitches, bugs, and Easter eggs. Although I will say, for me, I'm not so much of a finder of the glitches and things. What I like to do is immerse myself in the world. I actually, when I'm playing a game, not trying to analyze it, not trying to play test it, I tend to play fair, right? I'm not like trying to break the game. I have friends that will just do this automatically. Like whenever they pick up a controller, their immediate instinct is to try to break the game, right? Like smash the game rules in terms of the rules and everything. I am just not like this unless I'm trying to be on purpose to test a student project or something. All right, socializers interact with other players, right? And this is obviously where I think the MMO thing really comes into play here, because in non-MMO games, it's a little harder to do this, of course. Now, I do think when you're a socializer, I do think there's other components, even of single-player games, that still kind of scratch that itch. I think even talking to game characters, static game characters, not humans, can still scratch that itch if that's particularly well done. Now, this is one of my favorite categories because it really says something about you that's interesting. Who are the killers in the room here? Who likes to grief people? Who likes to just invade people's worlds in Dark Souls and slaughter them? Yeah, I'm not. I'm some of you I know, and I'm not surprised.
I
Um,
I gotta admit, I am also a great fan of PvP stuff.
yes, that's right.
Though I don't go that far to actively start ruining fun. I don't go that far. I do thrive on the competition though. It's fantastic.
Yeah, and that is definitely a player archetype. And what I find amusing about the killer is there's kind of a, I don't know if you would categorize this as a killer or not. This is what I mean, where someone can make a more advanced taxonomy now. I think there's a type of player that when they play a game with moral choices, like Knights of the Old Republic, which is getting a remake, please don't suck. Um, please, I beg you, don't ruin one of my favorite games. There are people. Yeah, well, a broken clock, right? Like sometimes is right. So yeah. But there's a certain type of player that in a moral choice game loves being as evil as possible, just loves it, right? And in Knights of the Republic, one of my best friends, who's like the nicest guy in the world, is actually the godfather of my oldest daughter and all that. He just picked every evil option, total dark side. There's that bit. This isn't really a spoiler because it's at the beginning of the game where like, what is his name? Davik, the gangster on the first planet. It's been so long, I'm not remembering the names exactly, but like there's that rat ghoul serum, and you can make a dark side choice to basically withhold that medicine from the people and give it to the gangster so he can like profiteer from it. These are the sort of things that you can do in the first Knights of the Old Republic, and he just loved doing that. I see that as that's some variation on the killer, I think, except in these RPGs with moral choices. Whereas, like every time for me, I tried to do a dark side playthrough of KOTOR, and I lasted about an hour. Like every horrible, evil thing, I would just be like, I don't want to do it really, right? It's even in Sonata Theory, like taking the evil roots that they put in. We're just like, there's just that's just not a personality thing for me.
So you feel bad.
Yeah, it does, right?
So I tried going the evil route.
Yes, yes, and some of us are that way, and it just says something interesting about ourselves. So anyway, achievers, explorers, socializers, killers. I'm sorry, did you say something? Yes, I know, right?
Something that's ugly, that's the thing.
Yeah, that's right. Force lightning is awesome. Like, why is force lightning evil? Yeah, that's right. Yeah, there's a lot of factors to balance, right? Yes.
Anytime I've been in like discussion on like when you have a game that gives you like these huge moral choices where you can either be completely good or horribly evil, I'm always reminded of like there was a scene in Detroit Become Human where it's like the founder of the company has what is it? Connor pointing a gun at another android and is like it's trying to prove that Connor has empathy. And the way that it's portrayed is like exactly how I feel in those scenarios because it shows even though it's a completely fictional game that is running on a computer script, you can still find empathy with those computer scripts.
Right. Yes. Yeah. And I haven't played that one yet. I played Heavy Rain as far as the David Cage oeuvre. I haven't gotten to that one actually. I kind of tapped out with Heavy Rain. It's good. I'll have to check it out. Yeah.
It's got the same, you know how with Nocturnal Takes I'm trying to make a split path, multiple ending
Yeah.
type of deal? It's Detroit Human is what I'm trying to do with that on a whole new level. And it even shows you the different paths that you could have taken. It's really cool. It really tells character the choices you have and like the choices you do, it really felt kind of personal. Because they're I don't but
All right, really awesome discussion. Now I wish I hadn't taken up so much time, on all the other class stuff. All right, so the Bartle test. So Bartle doesn't just leave this to chance in terms of determining what type of player you are. It's not a guess. He actually does have this test that he developed, and it's just a series of questions. You answer them, and it's really easy to Google Bartle test, and anyone can take this and in a few minutes get a sense of what type of player they are according to these metrics anyway. So that's kind of the crux of this. It's not just he did a taxonomy, but he also then developed this pretty cool test that one can take to kind of figure out what they are. And so let's see. I know that this is an activity slide, but since there's like 17 minutes left, let me look at what I have left here to make sure I'm getting through everything. Okay. Here's what I'm going to do, just to make sure that we get through everything. I'm going to skip that and go into the Shenmue stuff. Okay, anyone play Shenmue? Okay, I'm seeing like some. So Shenmue's a really interesting game, and it's the example I like to use when looking at a non-MMO and trying to filter it through the Bartle personality type. So just some background on Shenmue. It was released on the Dreamcast, RIP, in 1999. And you can actually get it like super cheap on the PS4 now with Shenmue 2. It's a package deal. And let's take a look at a bit of it here. So let me find it. I would classify Shenmue as a beautiful failure in a lot of ways, right? It's a really fascinating, interesting game. But it was the most expensive video game ever developed at that time. And but it had various issues, but definitely worth looking at historically. All right, so I'm going to find some no commentary video of this here.
Taco Bell.
Yeah, Taco Bell, fantastic.
That breakdown is like a 90s game.
Yep. So remember, 1999. So graphically, this would have been like, yeah.
You think that about the game that very first game that had quick time event?
Mhm. Oh yes, its dubbing is amazing. Okay. All right, so just to give you all a little context here, again, in 1999, these visuals would have, your mind would have exploded, all right? You would have been like, this is the greatest looking game I've ever seen. You would have thought that in 1999. Okay, so we're in a cinematic, in the opening cinematic. Let me skip ahead to some gameplay here.
I would complain about the fact that
腕に入れ墨があるってことか。
あんまり進められないけど、長い工業に行ってみたらどうだい？
長い工業。
大きな声じゃ言えないけど、入れ墨入れてるんなら、その筋の人かもしれないしね。
そうですか。
Trying to find okay, so you're walking through the town. That is some representative stuff. So this is a lot of the game, is you just walking around this sort of Japanese suburb and living your life every day. You can go into a lot of these stores, have conversations, including with the funky expat guy there that sells stuff. And one thing to notice is you have a clock in Shenmue, so the time passes not one-to-one to real time, but like it feels like it. Like you'll just sit there and wait and wait and wait because there's a day-night cycle, which was a big innovation then. And actually, the weather that you're experiencing in this game was actually based on the actual real weather in this place in Japan during those days in the 1980s, I think, when they set the storyline. So they actually went back and got weather data, right? So there was a day in Japan that had this weather, and they're represented on that day on the calendar. So the detail in this world is phenomenal. Okay. Now you can speed up time a little bit by looking at your watch, but man, it still feels like it takes forever to get because there are some game events that only happen at night. All right, so you kind of have the exploratory parts of the game, and then you have, let me try to cut to the chase here on some of this stuff.
think you are? You can't.
The English dub is fantastic.
So you think you're pretty tough, eh? Here, babe. Wouldn't you like to? What? Are you looking?
All right, all right. That's your life bar, that green circle on the bottom left. All right, so does this combat remind anyone of another Sega game? If you're knowledgeable about Sega games, yeah. Yes, Virtua Fighter, very good. Exactly, because this is the Virtua Fighter engine, so it's the same tech, and it's the same creator. That's the creator of Shenmue, Yu Suzuki, the creator of Virtua Fighter as well. So, you know, that's where that comes from. Now, what's weird is that the Shenmue combat is like not nearly as fluid and nice feeling as any Virtua Fighter game. I think it's just the difference between taking a fighting game that has like a fixed field of play and then putting it in a realistic world. It just does not translate as quite as well as you think it would. But yeah, that's why it kind of has that vibe. So good catch on that. Okay, so just quickly touring through elements here. Shenmue. Or some of the other. So you can play arcade games in Shenmue, which at the time was like a really cool thing that wasn't done before, I think.
Excuse me. Yeah.
Yeah.
Who's the best person around here to ask China? How about isn't the old?
Okay, all right. I have to admit, there's something about the way they handle the storytelling here. Notice how I'll let it roll a bit here. You know how do you know about people from China, right? He asked that person because part of the story. The way they handle this in this game is every plot beat automatically changes what you say to the NPCs and what the NPCs say to you, which is like really advanced actually, but it creates these unintentional hilarious moments where you're walking around town and it'll be like every person you talk to. Do you know anything about Chinese people? Do you know anything about Chinese people? It'll just be what you say to everyone, right? There's a famous meme about this game where it's basically, do you know sailors? Do you know anything about sailors? And that's like an old internet joke about Shenmue from the Stone Age, because you go around at that part of the game and every single person, do you know anything about sailors? Do you know where I can find some sailors? Right? So that's, again, it's kind of an advanced system that kind of comes out very odd in its actual implementation, which is kind of a Shenmue thing in general. A lot of really advanced, cool things where the actual execution of it is strange, right? But that's not actually why I showed you this. It's because you can actually play Sega arcade games in the arcade, which again, in 1999, you were just like, wow, that's amazing. I can go into a virtual arcade and play a machine.
I should try it once.
So, right, yep, you're playing Space Harrier, an actual Sega game. All right, awesome. So is there anything else I want to show about this? Well, let's look at the slides, and if there's something else I need to find, okay, then I will get to that. So, okay. So what I'm going to do now with the 7 minutes I have left here is, now that we've seen a bit of Shenmue, we're going to analyze it both from a Bartle perspective and from our forms of play perspective from Monday's lecture. Okay, so does it have Agon competition? A little bit. This is not a heavy Agon game. There's high scores in the arcade, right? There's competing against yourself. So there's that Agon, and I'm not talking about, yes, every game can be speed-runned, kind of superimposed Agon, if you will. But you have a little bit of Agon in that regard. Does it have Aaliyah? Yes, because there is slot machines and gambling. We didn't see that in the gameplay videos, but that exists. So there is Aaliyah that's very much present. The biggest thing, though, mimicry, I think. So absolutely, because you are more than a lot of games, I think, really playing this person's life, and you may not get that from the short clips we've shown, but a lot of Shenmue is you get up out of bed and you just have a day of your life. You have a job, you drive a forklift, you get paid, you go back, and then what happens is there are things that trigger the story advancement, but a lot of it is just like you are living this life, right? And so it's a huge mimicry game, and that's the part about it that holds up the best now, despite it being this kind of bizarre beautiful failure, as I like to call it. That aspect of it I still enjoy, even now, I would say. And there's other things you can do, like you practice at your dojo, your moves, and so on. All right, doesn't really have a lot of E-links. Remember, that's vertigo, loss of control, unless you consider the weird, stilted Virtua Fighter influence controls and E-links element, I guess. But not a big E-links game. So I would say mimicry is the primary type of play we're going for in Shenmue. You're really trying to inhabit this role, like really be in this person's life and imitate it. Okay, so what about the Bartle player types? Who does this appeal to? So going through them, WebEx does this to me every single time in every class, and someone can explain from IT why this happens. So I'm going to struggle with this for a minute and be annoyed. Okay. Achievers. Yes, just like that. Perhaps some appeal, right? But high scores, trophy chasing, which is, by the way, the brilliant thing about the whole trophy achievement system is you're kind of, yeah, again, every class it does this. Every person that is an achiever, is that itch is going to be scratched partially by the achievement. So that's actually a really cool thing. Explorers, this is the big thing for Shenmue. This is a big time explorer game. This is why when I played it again a couple of years ago on the PS4, I played through the entire game. And I actually don't always do that, right? Because I'm busy, I have a family, but yet I would sit there and play through this weird game with the bad dubbing and the weird combat. I played through the whole thing because it's really cool to explore this kind of suburban Japanese environment. And I actually really dug that. So yeah, big time explorer game. Socializers, maybe some through the NPCs when you ask them where sailors are 1,000 times, but obviously somewhat limited there as well. Killers, limited appeal again. Okay, yes, there's fighting, there's combat, but it's not, I would say, even the most important aspect of Shenmue. So it's a game really for the explorers. Now, what we try to do sometimes in game dev pitches, we're pitching games to publishers, is you would say, this is how our game appeals to every player type, right? So that does actually come up in game industry pitches when you're trying to get a game funded. You'll say, this game appeals to killers because we have this feature, and it appeals to socializers because we have this feature, right? And with Shenmue, you're only really appealing, I think, to the explorers primarily, people like myself, but there's a lot of you that look at this game. How many, let me just do a quick poll here, other than to laugh at it. Ignore that, because a lot of people play Shenmue to laugh at it now. Who is like, I'm going to check this game out, especially if it's just like $10, right? Okay, a little more of you than I would expect, but still the broad consensus, the kind of plurality in the classroom is, wow, this looks really janky and weird now, right? But part of that is not just its feel and vibe, it's the fact that it doesn't have these elements that appeal to you, right? It's got nothing for the killers, very little for the killers, not too much for the achievers. So maybe if Shenmue was remade and they made an attempt to appeal better to these other player types, you might have an interest in it. And so that's something to consider. And I think that's the value of the Bartle player taxonomy, is it kind of makes you think about different types of players, not just the type of player you are, right? Because that's what you're going to do instinctually. Okay, that's it. We're at 3:18. All right, thank you, everyone. See you later. You're welcome.
I am kind of.